What is up, my beautiful gemstones? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we are going to be discussing rock stars and mysterious curses. As I searched for something to entertain you all with this week, I finally looked through my comments and saw that many of you expressed an interest in the allegedly cursed rock stars when I mentioned them in my last few videos about curses. That's how I landed on the subject today, and I really hope that you enjoy this kind of break from the heavy. Yes, it's about curses and deaths, but compared to some of the things we normally tackle together here on this channel, I feel like since rock and roll is involved, it makes it at least a little better, and possibly even, for some of us, a lot less scary. Among the tons and tons of musicians across the world and throughout the centuries, it seems like rock stars and rock bands in general seem to sometimes draw themselves into an extraordinary number of strange stories and events that almost inevitably become intertwined in their legend and sometimes in their music as well. I mean, there's almost no end to the bizarreness in their lives, and most of the time, almost all of the time I would say actually, there's also no end to the decadence and eccentricity of the way that they live their lives. Among many of those tales, and among the rock stars and bands themselves, there's the cases of curses that dwell among them, and again, almost inevitably, that they end up kind of maybe attracting to themselves. Whether it's on purpose, like by playing around with the occult or possibly making contractual arrangements with the devil, or just by accidentally speaking the wrong words or being in the wrong place at the wrong time, around the wrong people, etc. Whether they mean it or not, rock stars are oftentimes like magnets for curses, or at least seemingly so, like they're magnets for weird and odd behavior and lifestyles. Does it come with the territory? Well, maybe after going through these cases today, we will all be able to understand it a little better and at least give our own informed guesses as to whether or not that's the case. So many of them seem to be cursed by some sort of malevolent and dark force or forces that wreak havoc not only on their health, but on their lifestyles and possibly even affects their families and other loved ones as well. They seem to bring about misery, misfortune, and oftentimes tragedy, again, not only to the subject of the alleged curse themselves, but to so many people who perhaps just come into casual contact with them even. There's a lot of speculation about whether or not these are just coincidental, albeit odd occurrences that randomly seem to happen as a result of the excessive and oftentimes drug-addled lifestyles they live, the company they keep, the lyrics they sing and or write, or of something much more dark and sinister, and honestly, it remains to be seen because there's really no way of knowing for sure. One thing I do know, especially after going through this information, is that there sure does seem to be a lot of strange activity happening around so many musicians, and today we're going to talk about some of the more mysterious cases of those alleged curses. So, grab yourself a snack and cozy on up and listen to your favorite classic rock group's album on backwards, and then come and join me as we discuss the sinister curses on mysterious rock stars throughout decades. Let's jump right in. So one of the more notorious and possibly even longer lasting cases of a curse I found is one that seems to have hung over the popular band Fleetwood Mac. Fleetwood Mac is a British-American band that technically got their start in London in 1967, and at that time they were known more as like a blues band. Fleetwood Mac is much more well known for their 1977 album called Rumors, which was a sensation worldwide and is still a very big hit and a popular album today. That album was the first one to be more mainstream and really connected them with a wider and larger audience. At the time it came out, that album stayed on the US Top 10 Singles Chart for 31 straight weeks and has sold over 40 million copies worldwide so far. It's the 8th best-selling album of all time in the world, and obviously the success of that album is what propelled the group into superstardom and infamy. Also, it's what set them on the road to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which they were eventually inducted into, by the way. Something else that this band has almost become known for throughout the years is a rotten string of bad luck that seems to be attached to all of its guitarists, for the most part. The first guitarist that's said to suffer from the alleged curse was the man who actually started the band in the first place, a man named Peter Green. At the time, he already had a history of substance abuse, and in more particular, he was a very heavy user of the powerful hallucinogenic drug called LSD, more known by the street name of acid. By 1969, Peter was well known for his use of acid, odd behavior, and his deteriorating mental capacities. He was known for being an unstable drug addict, basically, allegedly. He grew a beard, wore flowing robes, and went around proclaiming to anyone who would listen that he was the one and only Jesus Christ himself. He also constantly suggested to everyone else in the band that they give away all of their money and everything they own, all of their worldly possessions once they made it big, to charity. Just, yeah, hands it off. In March of 1970, he was at a party in Munich, Germany, when he accidentally overdosed on LSD and had what is known as a bad trip, during which he claimed to see angels everywhere and all around him. After that particular episode, it said that his mental health seriously declined and he was never the same again. Even for as weird as he was, it got so much worse and more bizarre after that bad LSD trip, and there's no coming back from something like that, as we see in Green's case. He left the group and shortly after was diagnosed with severe schizophrenia, which eventually caused him to be institutionalized. Peter Green had once been a great guitar hero, and so after bouncing around from institution to institution for years and receiving countless rounds of electroshock therapy, people who would visit him were dismayed and saddened to see the warped, weird, and bizarre shell of a man he eventually became. After he was finally fully released from the last institution, he couldn't find work doing anything but various and random odd jobs when and wherever he could, and he even spent some time working as a grave digger. This did nothing to deter the odd and bizarre behavior or the everlasting rumors of it. In 1977, there was an incident when he stormed the home of the band's accountant, whose name was David Simmons, and threatened him with a shotgun. Green said he was doing it because he was disgruntled at the fact that he was still receiving royalty checks from the music he created. At that point, Fleetwood Mac was incredibly famous and well-known, and everyone in the group was ridiculously famous and wealthy. In 1995, he actually formed another band and tried to make a return to the rock star life. The band's name was the Splinter Group, but it didn't even receive a fraction of the fame or wealth that Fleetwood Mac had, especially by that time, with decades of fame, fortune, and #1 hits under their belt. Unfortunately, Peter Green had become, and remains for most people, nothing more than a sad footnote in the history of the band, but more so in the history of music itself, allegedly. Fleetwood Mac's slide guitarist, whose name was Jeremy Spencer, also became entangled with the alleged curse at one point. Jeremy had a very flamboyant and wild image while he was up on stage, but in real life, he was devoutly religious and simply knew what the crowd wanted and how to put on a good show. He knew how to act the right way when up on stage. Drugs also came into play in making sure he would never be the same person again, just like with Peter Green. Jeremy Spencer was on tour with the band in Los Angeles in 1971 when he accidentally overdosed on mescaline. At one point while on the tour bus, he calmly and casually told the other bandmates that he wanted to stop and get off the bus to stop at a nearby bookstore to buy a magazine, but he never returned. When someone finally did see him again years later, they found out that he had become a part of a strange cult that we now know is a strange and deadly cult, but who no one really knew about back then. It was the infamous Children of God cult that he had joined, and it had been formed in the 1980s by a self-proclaimed prophet named David Berg. The Children of God cult was supposed to be loosely based on Christianity and its morals and values, but it deviated greatly to eventually include the free love and sex ideals of the time. Notoriously, again as we now know, all of this included grown men with underage girls. Spencer remained in the cult and never turned away from them, but he did continue to make music. As recently as 2006, he released an album called Precious Little, one in 2012 called Bend in the Road, and another one in 2014 titled Coventry Blues. Weird, but it doesn't stop there. Next up to face off with the curse was guitarist Danny Kirwan. In 1972, he had a very bizarre meltdown while touring the United States with the rest of the band. It's said that he was just mundanely trying to tune a guitar, at which point he became inexplicably and suddenly enraged and started headbutting and smashing the walls. He threw his guitar into a glass mirror and then climbed down into the audience, started ruthlessly heckling and taunting the band from the crowd as they all very awkwardly tried to go with the flow, pretend like it wasn't happening or like it was all part of the show, so they could keep the show going for the fans who had paid money to see them. Without that guitarist, that is. Awkward. Kirwan definitely had a history of severe drug and alcohol abuse, as well as extremely bizarre and odd behavior. And for the band, the stunt he pulled that I just described during that tour had been the last straw. He was kicked out of the band by the other members, and unfortunately, he would spend the rest of his life destitute and homeless, of course, after spending some time in various mental institutions. Things seemed to be going well for Fleetwood Mac, but the curse only seemed to be lying in wait for the next guitarist to overtake. It would come back with a vengeance in 2012. In January of that year, a former guitarist for the band named Bob Weston, who was 64 at the time and who was very well known for having had an affair with the band's drummer, Mick Fleetwood's wife, in the 1970s, was found dead in a London flat of an apparent brain hemorrhage. Later that same year, tragedy would strike again when another former guitarist for the band named Bob Welsh was suffering from complications from spinal cord surgery and was told he would never be able to walk again. Bob became despondent and, not wanting to become a burden to his wife, wrote out a suicide note and unalived himself with a gunshot to the chest. In fact, the only Fleetwood Mac guitarist who seemingly, or at least so far, hasn't been plagued by tragedy, illness, and misfortune is the current guitarist whose name is Lindsey Buckingham. Is it only a matter of time? I hope not, but there's no way of knowing. So guys, what do you think of this one? I mean, I think we have to consider the substance abuse, but think about it too, on the other hand. How many people are lost and trapped in the never-ending madness of substance abuse and addiction that don't accidentally overdose or completely lose their minds as a result? Is this a curse? As usual, I highly doubt it, but that's just because of how I feel about curses in general. Curses have to come from somewhere. And for the most part, not all the time, but for the most part, they have to be placed on someone or on the band or whatever. They don't just fall out of the sky, and they particularly don't usually jump from one person to the next. Usually they don't. And the fact that it was the guitarist in particular every single time does seem very interesting to me. That's not to say the rest of the band didn't have struggles and tragedy and overall oddness about them, but they're a mega famous rock band. I think, based on my own knowledge and experience, that this had something to do with an attachment or perhaps an addiction demon or something similar who simply moved from one to the other just like that. Was the fact it was the guitarist every single time a coincidence? I'm not sure, but again, you all know how I feel about coincidences. Let's move on. So there's another sinister curse that did the long menace on an English rock group, and that group is Led Zeppelin. The band was formed in 1968 and disbanded in 1980, and they're widely regarded as one of the most popular, successful, and influential rock bands of all time. They're definitely down in the history books for being amazing, and while I enjoy most of their music, the song Dire Maker is my absolute favorite of theirs. They were known as rock stars, but they were also known as pioneers in the heavy metal genre of music. So this curse seems to some to have a root cause, and unlike in Fleetwood Mac, whose alleged curse, as far as we know, seemed to have come from nowhere, it revolved around the guitarist in this one too. So once again, it's the guitarist, but in an entirely different way. It's said, and remember everyone, all of this information is alleged, that guitarist Jimmy Page had an extreme obsession with the occult. He had an obsession with the famed English occultist Aleister Crowley in particular. Page deemed Crowley a genius, and he was open and extravagant with his occultist views and activities. He owned an occult bookshop and publishing house, and he participated in the making of occult films, as well as owning tons and tons of Aleister Crowley paraphernalia. Jimmy Page went so far as to go and buy Aleister's castle, Boleskine House, on Loch Ness in Scotland. Obviously, when people see someone with an avid and almost extreme interest in all of these things, spooky and oftentimes ridiculous-sounding rumors grow and spread all over the place all of the time. For instance, take the amazing and extremely popular and beloved song Stairway to Heaven. It's supposed to have some sort of hidden and possibly demonic meaning when played backwards. The more sinister iteration, though, is the alleged curse that haunted this group. So this legend says that Jimmy Page somehow convinced the rest of the group that all of his mystic and occult beliefs were real and that they shouldn't engage in rituals with him. He managed to convince them to join in at least one of these arcane rituals, which had them all selling their soul to the devil. I roll my eyes because it doesn't work like that. Deals and contracts with the devil are certainly possible and do happen though, so I don't want to get caught up in the alleged details of the ritual and would like to just focus on the curse that allegedly came from it. It's also said that once the whole group did whatever this ritual was, it was the start of not only their amazing stardom and rise to rock and roll fame and infamy, but to a seriously sinister, relentless streak of bad luck that followed them, along with terrible tragedy, of course. It all began in 1975 when the lead singer and lyricist of the band, Robert Plant, was driving with his wife and 3 children, and they got into a horrible car accident. More specifically, they literally drove off a cliff, and his wife and 2 of his kids were very, very seriously injured. It shattered Plant's elbow and ankle, and this is the actual reason why the band's 1975 physical graffiti tour had to be canceled. Robert Plant's daughter, whose name was Scarlett, was 4 at the time, and she was completely unharmed and suffered no injuries from that crash. In 1977, Robert Plant was back on his feet, and the band was ready to go touring again. However, this North American tour was besieged by many odd problems. There weren't enough tickets to go around, and fans started to get violent about it. They rioted, revolted, and crashed through the gates of the event, and all of this left 50 people seriously injured and resulted in 19 arrests. To make matters worse, Plant became so violently ill that he couldn't even play. On top of all of that, the band's managers, John Bonham and Peter Grant, got into their own altercation with a member of the concert promoter staff. The concert promoter's name was Bill Graham, and the altercation was with one of the members of his team, left that person almost beaten within an inch of his life. So there were a few other things here too, guys. There was a terrible thunderstorm and numerous conflicts within the band itself. Honestly, with all of this and more to be considered, it's a miracle any of the shows ended up going ahead as planned at all. But the curse wasn't done here, and it would show up again in the form of a tragedy in Robert Plant's family. I think it happened during the concert where everyone was rioting and getting arrested because there weren't enough tickets, but either way, during a concert where they had already been significant drama and turmoil, Robert Plant's 5-year-old son, Carrick, would die of some kind of mysterious stomach bug, and this obviously made the band cut the concert short. Some say this was the beginning of the end for the band and when the dismantling started. In 1980, their drummer John Bonham went on an epic and very metal all-day drinking binge, which resulted in him passing out and choking to death on his own vomit. Very metal indeed. In the wake of Bonham's death, the great band Led Zeppelin, as it originally was, finally gave up and disbanded. There's only one member of the legendary band that seemingly remained untouched by the nefarious curse, and that was bassist and keyboardist John Paul Jones, and it's said that the reason he remained completely unscathed is because he was the only one who refused to participate in that dark ritual where everyone else in the band sold their souls to the devil for fame and fortune. Now, you'd think that this was the end of the story, but you'd be wrong. Not only is it said that Led Zeppelin was cursed, but people allege that Jimmy Page cursed another band by way of another dark ritual because he believed that they had disrespected his idol and hero, Aleister Crowley. What had happened was there was a band from Essex called Eddie and the Hot Rods who were also influenced by Crowley, and they featured him on the cover of their 1977 chart-topping single titled Do Anything You Want to Do. That sounds nice and everything, but the problem arose when they didn't just put his picture on the cover, but plastered Mickey Mouse ears on the occultist's head. This pissed Page off, and he cursed the band, and seemingly was pretty successful at it too. Whatever he did seemingly worked. Supposedly, as a result of the curse, Eddie and the Hot Rods were dropped from their label soon after the Mickey Ears fiasco. Their manager at the time became hopelessly addicted to heroin, and all of them lost all of their creative drive. They stopped working on songs and trying to achieve success, sort of just giving up on the whole thing. Even after having such a big taste of fame and fortune they had at one time with that hit single, but they just randomly lost all hope of ever charting again. This band's bassist talked about it once, and he said, quote, "Weird shit happened after that. A lot of people said we shouldn't have effed about with Crowley," end quote. Maybe, maybe not. If you missed the last video I did about famous people who seemingly had curses attached to them, then go back and watch it because you'll hear the legend of John Lennon and the alleged curse attached to him that followed him around his whole life, particularly involving the number 9. I'm not going to go over that again here today because I don't like being repetitive in my videos. So let's veer from the theme just a little bit, although hopefully you see it like I do as being in the same vein of things. I want to end this video by talking a little bit about deals with the devil throughout history, as I believe so many famous people, and even people who aren't famous but are wealthy and elite, have really and truly made pacts with the Prince of Darkness himself. I'm not joking or being facetious, and just knowing what I know, this is something that really terrifies me even to think about. I would never, ever even consider it, not for anything in the world, but who knows? It isn't like I've been asked, you know what I'm saying? It isn't like I've been like really wishing for something and it's been offered. What do you think you'd do if approached with everything you ever dreamed of? If you think you would take the deal or are on the fence, let's get into the discussion and see where you stand at the end of it all. Be sure and let me know your thoughts about all of this in the comments below, please, too. So there are a lot of legends around the world that have been here since time immemorial about deals with the devil and people making pacts with the devil or with some other very powerful demon or demonic entity. And normally it has the human being exchanging their soul for things like wealth, fame, youth, and or power, among a plethora of other things, I'm sure. These stories are deeply ingrained in Christianity specifically, but honestly, anything that involves the belief of a devil normally will contain the belief in bartering with him and or his minions and lessers. I'm not going to get into anything religious here, nor will I tell you all right here and now what I think and based on experience about these sorts of things, and have decided to just focus on people who've allegedly done it in the past. For as much as making diabolical deals with Satan have been a part of myth and legend for centuries, and possibly since the beginning of time, throughout the ages there have also been many people who have either admitted to or who have been thought to have actually made literal, very real pacts with him too. A common sort of theme around dealing with the devil are people who want to achieve great skill in their art and chosen profession. This sort of thing runs the gamut amongst professionals, but as we just touched on, it is especially popular among the circle of musicians. There's a famous and very influential composer and violinist from Italy named Giuseppe Tartini, who was said to have been offered such a dark deal back at some point when he lived, which was from 1692 until 1770. Tartini was well known for not only being a brilliant composer and for his sonatas, but also for his fiery and somewhat explosive temper. He would obsessively compare his work to the work of others constantly, and it's because of that that many people said he had an extreme superiority complex, always finding himself to be better and more talented than any other man, regardless of who it was he was coming up against. It's said that he became overwhelmed with despondency and consumed by despair when he overheard another violinist playing better than him, in his own eyes anyway. He became obsessed with outdoing the other violinist and ended up a recluse. Tartini locked himself away in his room, practicing relentlessly and nonstop for at least 12 hours a day, and it was during this self-imposed exile that the devil is said to have come to him. According to the story, Tartini had fallen asleep, and in his dream the devil told him that he could make sure that he became the most masterful violinist the world had ever known. The devil is said to then have picked up the violin himself and started very skillfully and artfully, masterfully playing a sonata, quote, with breathtaking virtuosity, the likes of which Tartini had never heard, end quote. He woke up and could still hear the sonata playing in his head. He tried to play it himself, but immediately knew that there was no comparison between what he was playing and what he had heard the devil do with the same instrument. He feverishly jotted down every single note he could recognize and remember from the dream, and eventually came up with the sonata called the Devil's Trill. It's sometimes called the Devil's Sonata and is Tartini's signature work. It was his most well-known and his best work, and it has indeed made him famous, as the devil promised it would do in the dream. Tartini admitted that he couldn't play it exactly as he had heard it in the dream when the devil had been playing it, but he came very close, and that was good enough for the masses. At one point, though, he said that his version of the sonata compared to what the devil had played for him was, quote, so inferior to what I had heard that if I could have subsided on other means, I would have broken my violin and abandoned music forever, end quote. The question we must ask here is, did the devil really give Tartini the sonata along with the knowledge that he would never be able to play it the right way, meaning the way the devil himself had played it? I've got to be honest, this sounds exactly like something the Prince of Lies would do, just to make sure that no matter how wealthy, successful, or famous the man became, he would always be tortured by the fact that he would never be able to play it the proper way, the way he had heard the devil do it in his dream. Of course, there's a whole lot more to this story, and that's just my summarization of it, because I have another case I would really like to discuss with you all here today. Tartini is by far not the only composer from back in the day that's said to have struck up a deal like this. In fact, Paganini himself was said to have gotten his astronomical and seemingly impossible skills from the big guy down below as well. I want to move on from composers somewhat and talk about Robert Johnson. This case fascinates me and is perhaps one of, if not the most well-known case of a musician striking a deal with the devil for talent. Robert Johnson was an American blues legend who lived from 1911 until 1938, and it's actually said that he might have been the first ever musician to be a part of the 27 Club. He joins that club among the ranks of some of the greatest musicians of our time, really. The ranks of my idol, Kurt Cobain, and Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Heath Ledger, Amy Winehouse, and so many more talented souls who are gone too soon. Johnson was ranked 5th out of 100 in the Rolling Stone magazine's list of top 100 greatest guitarists of all time. He was instrumental in spreading the sound of blues music and making it much more popular, and he's credited with influencing such masters and superstars as Eric Clapton and Keith Richards, as well as many others. Somewhat unbelievably, Johnson gained this type of notoriety with only 29 songs under his belt from his entire career. Robert Johnson was copied and idolized by other blues musicians of his time, and he's become almost godlike in the genre. One other thing he's famous for is the legend of how he rose to such success and prominence in the first place, which it said that he sold his soul to the devil at a crossroads to gain it all. It's said that when he first started out, he wasn't very good at playing the guitar at all, and although he avidly played the instrument in high school, more than a few people said he did not have a talent for it. This is why he never made a name for himself until he was 18 years old, despite all the years he had been studying, practicing, and playing the instrument before that. At age 18, Johnson exploded onto the scene, seemingly coming out of nowhere, and considering what's being said about his ability to play previous to when he catapulted to fame and superstardom, his new mastery of the guitar was severely out of place. Some wondered how he managed to become such a legend. His abrupt and seemingly newfound talent and skyrocket to fame and legend status made it unsurprising that people accused him of having acquired the abilities as a result of a deal with the devil. Robert Johnson encouraged the rumors and even talks about how it had all gone down. According to him, when he was 18 years old, he became utterly dejected and despondent when he realized he couldn't play the guitar well enough to make a living, let alone become a famous and wealthy musician with it. In an almost trance-like state, induced mainly by his own shame and disappointment at what he perceived was a failure to live his dream life, he walked around aimlessly until he came to a strange crossroads that he hadn't remembered ever seeing before. The devil was there waiting for him and offered him mastery of the instrument and a life of fame, fortune, and notoriety, as well as the status of legend when it came to the guitar, all in exchange, of course, for his soul. Johnson didn't hesitate. He didn't have to think about it. He immediately accepted the offer and turned to go back home. As soon as he got there, he was so imbued with so much raw talent that he was finally able to achieve all of his dreams and goals surrounding his ability to play the guitar. Johnson alludes to this pact at the crossroads in several of his original songs, including ones called Crossroad Blues, often called just Crossroads, and Me and the Devil Blues, among many others. I find it interesting, as do many other people familiar with the facts of this case, that Robert Johnson died under mysterious circumstances in 1938 at the age of only 27 years old. And as I mentioned earlier, the curse of 27 carries with it its own mystery, even in this day and age. The exact circumstances of his death remain shrouded in mystery and are murky at best, and the story differs depending who you ask about it. Some say he was murdered by the jealous husband of a woman he merely had a flirtation with, and others say he merely just burnt out from the lifestyle of a blues musician and guitarist and died of some perfectly ordinary means, though no one can say for sure what that means was. In fact, his death is so shrouded in mystery that it's not even known today where his grave is located. The story that I've personally heard the most, though, is that he knew he only had until he was 27 years old before the devil came to collect his soul and receive his part of the bargain. He enjoyed the success of this world, and when he turned 27, he found his way back to that same strange crossroads, and hellhounds could be seen and heard coming for him from all directions, eventually dragging him away into hell to fulfill his promise to the devil. There are stories of musicians and others who have made these sinister deals with Satan who actually confront him and end up leaving the situation with their souls intact despite the deals they've made. There's a woman from Colorado named Raquel Robinson who said her uncle had a similar tale of dealing with the devil, but he managed to get out of it without forfeiting his soul. Her uncle, who was a musician, was in New Mexico and on his way to play at a nightclub as he stopped for gas. When he went inside to get a drink and came back out, there was a strange man standing at his vehicle. The man explained that his car had broken down and he needed a ride. As fate would have it, or maybe it wasn't fate at all, the stranger said he just happened to be going to that same nightclub and asked if Raquel's uncle would be so kind as to give him a ride. The uncle, not wanting to be rude or mean, having already told the man where he was going, reluctantly said okay that he would give him a ride. That's when things started to get very strange. Once in the car, the stranger produced a bottle of whiskey and began drinking from it. He had been pouring it into a glass and drinking and not drinking out of the bottle as I initially imagined, but the uncle said that no matter how many glasses of the stuff the strange man had, the bottle never emptied. They had already established at that point that our uncle was a musician, and out of nowhere and after dozens of glasses of whiskey, he started asking the uncle if there was anything he wished he could change about the way he played. The uncle responded that he was happy with his talent and the way he performed, and that there was nothing he would change if he could. After a few moments of awkward silence, the stranger started loudly whistling the tune to a song that the uncle had only recently written and that he hadn't shared with anyone or played yet. He asked the stranger where he had heard that song or that tune, and the stranger had a most cryptic answer saying, quote, "I know many things," end quote. The stranger then told the uncle that the song could make him a millionaire and asked if that's something he wanted. The uncle replied that he knew if he worked hard enough, he would earn the money. The man was becoming increasingly creepy and then said he had to use the bathroom. The uncle pulled over at another rest stop eventually, and the stranger got out to use the bathroom. He waited for the man to come out for about 15 minutes, but the man had seemingly disappeared into thin air. When the odd stranger didn't come out of the bathroom after 15 minutes had passed, Raquel's uncle went into the bathroom and into the little store all around the property looking for the man. It was a very small area of land where the man could have been, but he wasn't in the bathroom or the store, and he was nowhere on the property. The clerk said that he hadn't had any customers in the last hour, and it said that even a security video showed no one coming or going in at that time. No one entered or left the bathroom besides the uncle, at least according to the footage. I don't know why some random night clerk would be willing to show some random stranger the security footage, but I also don't know when this story is supposed to have taken place, and maybe nowadays they wouldn't do it, but back in the day, people were much more likely to do a favor for someone given he had no customers and nothing but time on his hands. I'm choosing to give the benefit of the doubt to Raquel and her uncle here, but it sounds like a detail someone might put into a story to make it sound more believable. That's just my opinion, though, and that says nothing about the story up to that point. Let's move back to the story, and you can make your own decisions on that detail. The uncle gave up and left, but that wasn't the last he would see of the creepy stranger. He drove back onto the highway and saw the strange man on the side of the road a few miles away. As the uncle approached the man, he noticed that he wasn't actually walking on the ground, but floating a few inches above it. No matter how fast the uncle drove to try and catch up with the mysterious hitchhiker, he could not reach him. The man was always ahead of him and still only seemed to be walking at a slow and leisurely, very steady pace. Eventually, he disappeared altogether out of sight. The uncle insists to this day that the stranger was the devil, and once he realized he was an honest man with no interest in fame or fortune, he moved on and never came back. He realized essentially that Raquel's uncle couldn't be bought. I absolutely believe in this encounter despite my initial hesitation over the security footage. Guys, I could go on and on and on. And in fact, I think I will. I told you guys last time that Curses was going to end up a series on this channel, so consider this the next installment of that series right here with so much more to come. Military leaders, painters, other artists, and people who are just plain power and money hungry. If you've had your own encounter with the devil, then please by all means share it with me here through emailing me, or if you have my number, just shoot me a text. Of course, you can always remain anonymous. Please try not to leave them in the comments because they do get lost a lot easier that way. That's all I have for you today, guys. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed the content, if you enjoyed hanging out with me, and if you enjoyed hanging out with one another in the premiere, if that's when you're watching. My new book, Danger at Your Door, Encounters with the Black-Eyed Kids, my 4th book, is now a bestseller thanks to you guys and your tremendous constant support of me. I cannot thank you guys enough. If you want an autographed copy, hit me up, reach out to me before making the purchase, and I can get that for you. If you already bought a copy and want it autographed, you'll just have to send it to me. It's also available on Kindle, Kindle Unlimited, paperback, and Audible. Actually, all of my books are available on Audible. My other books, Missing the Fae Theory, Encounters with Evil, 101 True and Terrifying Stories, and Shadow Entities, Sleep Paralysis, and Beyond, are all available on Amazon, Kindle, paperback, Kindle Unlimited, and Audible. All of the links for all of those will be in the description box, okay? So let me know if you want any of them signed. I will get them out to you right away. Just send the money to my PayPal or Cash App if you need to know how much, if you want to send an encounter story, if you just want to talk to me, if you got anything to say, etc., etc. Email me at GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com. GemmaJadeYT.com. There is a companion book to Danger at Your Door called Midnight Visitors, okay? And that is a companion book about the Black-Eyed Kids, but it is only encounters. And that is for pre-release on Kindle right now, okay, on Amazon. Otherwise, it's being released tentatively around February 13th if I don't happen to get it done earlier, which I am trying my best. I'm really excited, guys. This means the absolute world to me. Please continue to watch the shorts, like the shorts, leave comments, positive comments in the shorts, and support me in that way. I really do appreciate it. It does mean a great deal to me and helps me out so, so much. Check out the description box for ways to donate to the channel. Very, very important. So I could pay for things like StreamYard, Oracle decks, getting the spiritual helper boxes and little gifts that sometimes I need to send, and sometimes you guys ask me to send out to you all to pay for postage and mailing and stuff like that. Gemma Jade merchandise at jivecreations.com. Go and check that out. Ghost Dragons EW merchandise as well. Gemma Jade Paranormal is now on Rumble. It's a free download, guys. You don't have to do anything except download it and search Gemma Jade Paranormal. I would really, really appreciate it. All right, that's another income source for me, and also another very less strict and less stressful way for me to bring my content to you guys, live streams included. So there's a lot of content on there right now. Ghost Dragons EW is slowly putting up video after video. We're not able to live stream yet, but we are figuring out those little details so that eventually, very soon, we will be able to live stream. Check out the description box for the schedule for the week, for the live streams, the pre-recorded uploads, and all that jazz for the most part. Now, sometimes they do change, so check out the shorts. Every week, I do an update short letting you know when Live Intuitive Oracle is going to be, anything else that's changed for the schedule for the week, or anything else that I want to announce to you guys or ask you guys, or whatever the case may be. Until next time, be kind to each other, guys. It doesn't cost anything. Be kind to yourselves, and never accept anything less than others being kind to you. If no one told you today, you're beautiful, you're amazing, you can have and do anything you want in this whole world if you just believe in yourself. You are co-creator with the universe. I got your back. I believe in you. Always go in grace. Smile at a stranger, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.